What's up, y'all? Alvin here, and this is Question and Answer, episode 13. There doesn't seem to be any end in sight.
I tell the good jokes.
All right, let's jump right into it. Got a lot of questions, a lot of good questions, a couple of pretty interesting questions. Number one, I can't tell you where I got the shirt. I got the shirt from Yeti. You'll be able to get the shirt from Yeti pretty soon, too. Common question. Everybody wanted to know that one. So Anthony Russo wants to know, could you explain what seasons are best for certain fish in Texas? So that's one of the great things about being in Texas is we actually have year-round fishing. So there's always something to catch. My two favorite species are going to be bass and redfish. Bass fishing is great pretty much every time of the year except for the hottest part of the summer and the coldest part of the winter. Although we still catch them both of those times. My favorite times to fish for bass are going to be from, say, late winter through early summer, and then again throughout the fall and into the early winter. Same thing for the redfish. Most of the year is good with the exception of the coldest part of the winter and the hottest part of the summer. So for redfish, I would say late spring through early summer, and then again the entire fall and into the winter. As long as the weather's nice, fishing's probably good for one of those two species. Hope that helps. Thanks for the question. Chase Rogers wants to know, am I going to make it to the fly fishing film tour this year? And I don't think so because I'm on the water. Spring, early summer, fishing's great. I'm out there most days and looks like I'm going to be out there when the film tour hits here. Enjoy it without me. Thanks for the question, Chase. Decolonized Meteor wants to know, how do you approach wading versus float? Gear, tactics, all of it. For me, most of the time I'm float fishing or fishing out of a boat, whether I'm on the river or I'm at the coast. Most of the time I'm in a boat. Now there are some occasions where on some of the smaller streams I'll get out and wade fish, and there's times on the coast where we'll hop out of the boat. Maybe the fish are in water that's too shallow for us to get to in the boat, and we'll get out and walk. Most of the time I've got all my gear in the boat, so I got everything. If I'm hopping off the boat, I'll throw a fly box, make sure I got some clippers, and just hop out and go. Now, if I'm going to do a wade trip specifically, like I'm leaving the house and I'm going to go wade fishing, I pretty much pack the same as I would if I was going to go and fish on somebody else's boat. I'll have my Yeti Panga backpack, a few boxes of flies, a couple spools of tippet, my lunch, and maybe a little bit of camera gear. I like to keep it light, so I want to have just enough stuff that I can have everything I need. Oh, and definitely some water and some coffee, because those are essential items as well. I can stuff all that stuff in a medium-sized backpack, and I'm good to go for the day. As far as tactics go, that's a whole nother video, so hopefully I can get into that at some point in the near future. But thanks for the question. Okay, so Llano River House has a question. Top 3 skiff recommendations for someone that wants to buy their first one and get after the redfish. Does it need a tunnel hull, fiberglass versus aluminum, jet versus prop, new versus used? Asking for a friend. Now, I'm going to say for your first one, those are all good questions. Kind of tough to answer because no one skiff is going to do everything, even on the Texas coast, depending on the type of fishing you're planning on doing, whether you're going to fish by yourself, with one buddy, two buddies, whether you're thinking about guiding out of this boat in the future. So there's a ton of questions to ask. A couple of my initial thoughts: if you can find a used boat, unless you're a rich guy or gal, a used boat's probably going to be a much better deal. They're pretty hard to find nowadays. Everything's hard to find nowadays, but I would definitely go with used because you may or may not get it right the first time out. So that first skiff may just be your starter skiff. And then you kind of figure out like, oh, I really wish I had something that could do this. Like I want a boat that can cross open water and be a nice dry ride versus something that will float super skinny. It really just depends on the type of fishing you're planning on doing. There's a million questions to be answered, and I would say just find something that's in your budget that maybe somebody you know has, so you can get out and actually give it a try, and good luck. I mean, it is a tough decision to make, and it took me a while. I got lucky, and I'm pretty happy with my first skiff, which is hopefully going to be my last skiff. Thanks for the question. Okay, so Adam Westcott ATX wants to know, what is your fly rod recommendation for redfish on the Gulf Coast? Size, model, manufacturer. If you want the exact ones that I'm using, I'm going to say 9-foot, 8-weight Orvis H3. My wife prefers the Orvis 9-weight H3 in a 9-foot. You can't go wrong with either one of those. There's a bunch of other ones that will work out there. I would say just figure out what your budget is, do a little bit of online research, and if you're lucky, go cast a couple. Really, everybody's making great 8 and 9-weight rods right now. That's almost as popular as 5 and 6-weight rods. So most of the companies really focus on doing their best job in those particular line weights. Thanks for the question. This is a good one. Corey Thornton wants to know, what is my personal best largemouth from Texas waters? It's probably not as big as you think. I've caught 2 largemouth bass over 7 pounds, but they both came out of the river. So they were both Colorado River fish. So river fish typically don't get as big as lake fish. They have to work a little bit harder to make a living than a fish in still water. So a 7-pound river largemouth is a pretty big fish. The largest any of my client has ever caught would be 8.5 pounds, and that's an 8.5 pound fish that we actually weighed on the Boga Grip. It looked like an 11-pound fish in the photos. I think the current river record is about 11 pounds, so I'm nowhere near it. But unfortunately, most of the time I'm on the sticks rowing the boat instead of actually casting. So my opportunities to catch that next big largemouth are a lot smaller than the chances of one of my clients catching one over 8 pounds. But I'm still having tons of fun out there. So thanks for the question. Okay. Believe it or not, this is not the first time this question has come up. This one is from Daniel Loveland, but like I say, I've heard it before. So what happens when you or your client has to go number 2 on the boat? What's that old saying about a bear and all that? Most of the time, fortunately, the type of fishing that I do, we're either on the river and the nearest shoreline is fairly close, or we're on the bay and we're fishing next to shorelines. We're not fishing out in the middle of the bay or out in the middle of a lake. So it's usually pretty easy to get to a shoreline and take care of business. I don't know what you do if you're in a boat out in the middle of a lake or out in the middle of the ocean or out in the middle of the bay, but that's what we do when we're out. Thanks for the question. I know it's a natural function. Everybody's got to go, and sometimes you got to go during the middle of the day. It's no big deal. Like I said, we had some good ones this week. Okay, so we got a couple questions about the Devil's River this week. Reyes is Reeling wants to know, what are your most productive flies for the Devil's River? And if I could only have 2 flies to fish for bass on the Devil's River, it'd be a crawfish and a frog. I've had lots of success with those 2 flies, but like any other bass fishing or any other fishing for that matter, there's a ton of flies that'll work. Whatever you're most confident with, whatever you like throwing out there is probably the best thing to use. But thanks for that question. That's a good one. Okay, so this next one is from Brian Smith. And Brian wants to know, when on the bow in salt water, what distance should one be able or expected to cast and shoot line? I cast a lot in the yard with my 9-weight and double hauling and just wondering what might be expected of me. So I did a whole video on how far do you need to cast. I'll link that up there. It's usually not about the distance, at least not the type of fishing that we're doing on the Texas coast. So if you can make an accurate 40 to 50 foot cast in a timely fashion. So that means with the minimum amount of false cast, you can land that fly within a circle, maybe a 2-foot circle at 40 feet, you're gonna do great. So practice those super accurate 40 and 50 foot casts. Now, if you can make a 70 or an 80 foot cast fairly accurately, that's even better, but it's not essential because most of the fish that we're gonna cast to are gonna be within that 40 to 50 foot range, and a lot of them are a lot closer, and those tend to be the harder casts to make, is the ones where the fish suddenly pops up and they're 10 feet from the boat and you got to put a fly in front of them. So practice the short cast too, the quick game, the short game, whatever you want to call it. Okay, Yaya Killian, this is actually one I've been thinking about. Yaya Killian wants to know, will you ever do a giveaway for a guided trip? I actually have been thinking about that. And if you guys have any ideas for some type of contest we could do to give somebody a guided trip, let me know. I'm definitely thinking about it. Thanks for the question. Will Ellis 101 wants to know what time of year is best to book a Devil's River trip and what does a typical trip entail? Fall and spring are going to be the best times to fish the Devils just because that's when the weather's nicest and the fish are most active. It gets really hot in the summer. The Devil's River is in the desert. And in the winter, although the weather can be really nice, it can be pleasant to be there, the water temperatures a lot of times will get too low for the fish to be very active. So the best times, fall and spring. As far as what the trip entails, there's a lot of different ways to do a trip on the Devils. Everything from a fully guided trip where you stay in a ranch house at night and all your meals are cooked by a chef, to a self-guided trip where basically you run a shuttle, you're sleeping on the side of the river every night and taking care of everything yourself. So the Devils is kind of a whatever you want to do or whatever you want it to be. Obviously, the least expensive is going to be the self-guided trip, and the most expensive is going to be the fully guided meals made by a chef every night trip. And if you need more specific information, you should probably just send us an email because that video could take days to make. Anyway, thanks for the question. Okay, so Canvas Nate says he hasn't had a chance to watch all of my question and answer videos, and he was curious about whether anybody had asked this question, and that was tips for bass fishing at night. And I must admit, I have not done a lot of nighttime bass fishing, with the exception of a few trips out to fish around lighted piers, and that's mostly for white bass and stripers and stuff like that. So I don't have a lot of information about fishing for bass at night. I would guess that probably going to be real similar to fishing for trout at night, you know, big noisy patterns. The nice thing about bass fishing at night or any other time is the strikes are usually pretty aggressive. So if you don't set the hook immediately, a lot of the times the fish will hook themselves. I do know that that is one of the hardest things about fishing for trout at night, is to actually detect the strikes. Like I said, I don't really know a whole lot about fly fishing for bass at night. I used to tell everybody nighttime was a good time for drinking or tying flies. Haven't been drinking lately, but nighttime is a good time to tie flies. Anyway, thanks for the question. Good luck out there. Watch out for those snakes. All right, so my old buddy Chris Koch has got a great question. This is the burning question. Anybody in Central Texas wants to know the answer to this, and that is, have you seen any indication that Tesla will be a friend or foe in the stewardship of the lower Colorado River? Now, if you don't know, Tesla just built a huge facility on the banks of the Colorado River just outside of downtown Austin. As we speak, Elon Musk is buying more and more real estate along the river. So I want to say he is probably the largest landowner on the Colorado River near Austin now. He has said that his property is going to be an ecological paradise and open to the public. So we're going to hold him to that. I do feel like the potential is positive for several different reasons. Number one, because he's made these public statements already. So, it's out there. The other thing is a lot of the issues that we have along that stretch of the river, it's kind of hard to get them taken care of, either because of lack of funds or we just don't know who is responsible. So we have breached berms on old gravel pits, dumping muddy water into the river. The landowner just doesn't have the funds to repair that, or there's some issue going on over here or over there with muddy inflow, or somebody's dumping tires somewhere. But the thing is, now with Elon owning all this property, we know he's got the funds. He can pay to fix these breached berms. He says that he's going to have an ecological paradise, so I'm assuming that means he's going to minimize any damage created by having this huge Tesla facility on the river. And like I said, we're all watching. So I'm going to have the positive attitude right now and just assume that Mr. Musk is going to be an advocate for the lower Colorado River. And who knows, maybe one of these days I'll get him out there on the water and we'll fish together and I'll tell y'all all about it. Probably not, but you never know. Anyway, thanks for the question, Chris. All right, y'all. Like Canvas Nate said earlier, there's a bunch of question and answer videos. I'll throw the link up there. You can watch them. Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you in the next one. And in the meantime, good luck on the water.